Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Yonit Arthur. I'm an audiologist and strength coach, and I specialize in vestibular disorders. Welcome to my channel, The Steady Coach. Today we're going to be talking about 5 small habits that are keeping your chronic dizziness symptoms going. Now, why are we talking about habits? Well, as you know, on my channel, I talk a whole lot about the nervous system, stress, and emotions. And from my perspective, those are really the main things we need to be addressing in order to help you get better from the symptoms you're experiencing. That said, having worked with many people at this point who've been dealing with chronic dizziness, there are some practical changes that also tend to happen in people's lives as they get better. And my hope is that by sharing some of these small habits with you and giving you some ideas about how you can go about changing them, I'll be able to help you fast track your recovery. And before I go into the habits, I want to say that although I'm calling these habits small, they're really not that small at all. Very small changes in our behavior from day to day can result in huge changes over time. If you think about an airplane flying from a city in California toward New York City, a small change of just a few degrees would have that plane landing in Washington, D.C. So even just a small change of a couple degrees in these small habits I'm going to share with you today can help completely change the trajectory of your recovery process. The first habit that might be keeping you dizzy is how you're using social media. And I'm not referring to the visual symptoms right now, although of course I have videos just on that I'll link to in the video description. What I'm referring to is both the quality of the groups you're in on social media and the quantity of time you're spending on social media. So we're gonna tackle both of these separately. As far as the quality of the groups goes, what I'm referring to is the fact that most large social media groups for folks with chronic dizziness have a few major problems. The first is that people who get better tend to leave. And that means that the people in the group are those who have not gotten better and are particularly frustrated and upset about what's going on. In other words, there's a strong negativity bias in the groups toward people who aren't getting better, because those who do get better or decide to take a different approach to their healing leave the groups. There's also the problem of what psychologists will often call anxiety contagion. So I've got bad news for you. You are a social animal. No matter how introverted or extroverted you are affected by other people's feelings and words. And when you are in a group surrounded by very anxious people who are full of fear about their symptoms and full of frustration and negativity, that is going to affect you as well. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't be able to be honest about how difficult your experience is, but there's a big difference between being with a group of people who think there's no hope and being with a group of people who are being honest about their symptoms and experiences, but who believe that they are able to recover. So my suggestion is, if you are in a bunch of groups or even just one group in which there is a whole lot of anxiety and a whole lot of bias toward people who have never gotten better and believe they can't get better, you want to leave those groups behind. As you guys know, I run my own membership community for people recovering from chronic dizziness. And in our community, we are very honest, of course, about the difficulties that this condition leads to, but we also do a whole lot to celebrate people's successes and provide enthusiastic support for people no matter where they are in their recovery journeys. So I will link to that below if that's something you're interested in. But the other thing you should be thinking about, regardless of the quality of the groups that you're in, is the quantity of time you're spending in the groups. No matter how great the group is, if you are constantly spending time thinking about dizziness-related things, you are inadvertently telling your brain to focus on the dizziness, and this is not what you want for recovery. So you have a few different little hacks you can use here to help reduce the amount of time you're spending thinking about your dizziness. My suggestion is to look carefully at how frequently you're visiting your chosen group or social media site. If you feel that it's not excessive and it's not contributing to you thinking about your dizziness more than you need to, then you're golden. Keep on doing what you're doing. But if you think maybe there's some room for improvement there, here are some ideas for you. The first is to think about what is cueing you to go into the group. I want you to try to find that moment right before you log in and figure out what it is. Sometimes that cue may be external in the form of perhaps notifications on your phone or on your computer or emails. Those notifications can be turned off so you get fewer cues. The other thing that might be cueing you is emotional stuff. Maybe you're feeling anxious and you want reassurance. Maybe you're feeling angry and want to vent. And those are all perfectly valid reasons for seeking support, but if you're aware what they are, you're going to have a choice about what you do with them. So maybe it is appropriate for you to go to the group anytime you need reassurance, but maybe that's also leading you to spend a little too much time in the group, in which case, perhaps when you notice that you need reassurance, you try other forms of reassurance first, such as listening to music, meditating, connecting to people, calling up a friend, all the things you already know how to do. The second small habit that is probably keeping you dizzy is that you are checking for your symptoms in response to certain times of the day or certain activities. And the classic example of this is waking up and immediately saying, "Oh my gosh, am I dizzy?" And you might be saying to me right now, "Well, Yonit, I can't really stop my thoughts. It just kind of happens." And that's exactly what a habit is. It's an automation. The good news is you can unautomate it. Now, I probably don't need to tell you more about this, but the danger with checking for dizziness is that you're accidentally increasing the fear or danger response in your brain when you do that. And that ironically leads to greater likelihood that your symptoms are actually going to happen. So this is really not a good habit. Fortunately, it's one that you can change. And for conquering something like this, I like to use a technique that I've started calling scaffolding. But basically what that means is you build new habits on top of your existing habits. So again, first you want to identify the cue. Is the cue first thing when you wake up? I wake up and then I think, "Oh my gosh, am I going to be dizzy?" Is it some other activity that you're doing that's causing you to start checking for symptoms? And of course, all of these things are completely understandable. Of course, you're checking for dizziness. It's terrible and you're trying to avoid it. But it would be really cool if you could take out some of the automation in that process so it didn't happen every time you did that particular activity. So once you've identified your cue, what you're going to do with scaffolding is build a new habit on top of the habit you already have. It's a lot easier to build a new habit paired with an old habit than it is to just go cold turkey off of an old habit. So, for example, if your current habit is to wake up, "Oh my God, am I going to be dizzy?" I want you to start adding something else to that. So one option would be to put your hands on your heart and remind yourself that you're safe. And you can do that again each time that old habit pops up. Once that new habit is established, you might first find yourself not doing the first habit in the first place, but you're also going to find yourself automatically transitioning from that message of danger to a message of safety, which means that the message of danger is going to have a lot less of an impact on your brain. Of course, the example I gave is not the only option. You could think about starting a meditation or movement practice in the morning. You could even just get up and have a nice warm cup of tea every time you find yourself practicing your old habit. It's totally up to you. Pick something that works well in your life. The third habit that is probably keeping you dizzy is researching your symptoms when they happen. And I know that they're scary, and I also know that the reason you're watching me on YouTube is probably because you are researching your symptoms online. So I totally understand why you're doing that, but just as we talked about in the first two habits, the more time and the more energy you devote to your symptoms, the more that fear and danger response tends to spiral out of control, and the more that automatic alarm system in your brain keeps the neural circuit dizziness symptoms going. So for habits like this, I like to do something called adding friction. I like to make it a little bit harder to do something. And you'll be really surprised at how little friction it often takes for you to not actually do the habit. So again, as in the previous two examples, you're going to want to figure out what the cue is. When you start feeling anxious, when you feel a new symptom, when you're worried about something else, because as we talk about a lot on my channel, a lot of these things have an emotional component that we're not always aware of at first. But whatever the cue is, from there, notice how easy it is for you to start pulling out your phone and researching your symptoms, and see if you can come up with some ideas about how you can make it harder. So a simple example might be, say you've identified that it's really towards the evening when you're tired, when your symptoms come on, that you start worrying about them and getting stuck in this cycle of researching and worrying. Maybe you add friction by putting your phone in your bedroom, so it's just a little harder to get to. So you might start worrying, oh my gosh, my symptoms, and really want to look this up online, but you have to walk all the way to the bedroom to get your phone. And I know that seems like it would be super easy to do, but with these automatic habits, once we bring them to the conscious mind, in other words, once you're aware you're doing it, you actually have a chance to stop yourself rather than just going ahead with the habit. So think about ways that you can add a little friction to make it harder for yourself to over-research your symptoms. Habit number 4 that might be keeping you dizzy is that you might be identifying with your symptoms. And I know that it's often a really, really big help to get a diagnosis and to find a community of people who are going through the same thing. Those are awesome. But sometimes what that ends up causing is that people start to identify as their condition. They start to make it a part of their identity. I hear phrases like, I am a vestibular warrior, or I am in remission. The first implies that you are your vestibular condition, and the second implies that you're not actually recovering, you're just temporarily feeling better. So look for phrases that you're saying to yourself that start with the words I am, and see if you might be identifying with your condition and viewing it as part of your identity. Dr. Rachel Zoffness, who is a specialist in chronic pain, says your brain hears everything that your mouth says. And I think this brilliantly sums it up. Your words matter. There are connections in your brain between the default mode network, which is involved in your perception of self, and your automatic nervous system. We do not want to reinforce the connection between your symptoms and your identity. So my suggestion is, because as you guys know, I'm all about open communication about your experiences, try to just use less identifying statements. Instead of, I am a vestibular warrior, you could say, I am a warrior and I currently have a vestibular condition. Instead of I am in remission, you can say, I'm feeling better right now. You can use terms like yet, right now, or still to indicate to your brain that you view yourself as being part of a process of recovery. Again, I know that may seem like a small detail, and it is a small habit, but over time, those small habits add up. And again, we don't want to reinforce the idea that this condition that you currently have is part of who you are, because it's not. Your strength as a person is not defined by the condition that you currently have. The 5th habit that you may find is contributing to your symptoms is viewing all these healing things that you're doing as fixing your symptoms. Now, I want to say off the bat, I want you to continue doing the things that are making you feel better and that are helping you in your recovery process. But I want you to notice if you are viewing those things as things that are fixing your broken brain versus things that are helping your brain learn that movement is safe. Those are completely different messages to your nervous system. My suggestion here is to try to change the way that you're viewing these to having a process-oriented goal versus an outcome-oriented goal. A process-oriented goal is one that is focusing on the things that you're doing, and an outcome-focused goal is something that is focusing on the eventual long-term outcome. So for example, a process-oriented goal would look at the process as part of the goal itself, and an outcome-oriented goal would look at the final finish line as the goal. So an example of this would be if you're doing VRT or vestibular rehabilitation exercises and you're thinking to yourself, I've got to do my exercises so that I can get rid of this dizziness. A process-oriented goal would say, I'm doing these VRT exercises so I can show my brain that it's safe to move again. Again, doing the same thing, but providing the nervous system with a completely different message about why you're doing what you're doing. One of them, the process-oriented one, is a message of safety. The other one, the outcome-oriented goal, is a message that in many cases makes people feel more anxious. It makes people feel like they fail, and it makes it harder for them to keep going when they have the inevitable ups and downs in their symptoms and their process. This can be really hard to do. It's a hard shift to make. So you'll need to sit down with this and think it through, but see if you can figure out a way to develop process-oriented goals for the things that you're doing right now for your healing. I hope this was helpful for you guys, and I look forward to seeing your comments on the habits that you're currently changing and how it goes when you try out my suggestions. And of course, if you liked this video, please like it, please share, please subscribe to my channel, and I look forward to seeing you guys again. Thanks so much for tuning in.